behavior, those types of things. Whoa, come back here. And so the Class A fire extinguishers, they're designed to, of course, put out Class A type fires, your ordinary combustibles, your wood, your paper, those types of things. Class B is your flammable liquids, so it takes certain kinds of extinguishers to be able to put those fires out. Class C means it's safe to use around energized fires. So if there's electrical component added into it, then Class C fire extinguishers are designed to take care of that. There's Class D fire extinguishers, which is flammable metals. The thing about those, and we'll get into it a little bit more later, is they're usually specific for a certain type of metal. Now there's some general ones out there, but they cover a few of the metals, but they don't cover all of them. And I think that's what we have in our engine. We've got a yellow extinguisher for Class D type fires, but it only covers certain metals if they're on fire. And those are tricky ones. If you go to any industry, or if you go to a fire where there's a large amount of engines involved, then you have to be concerned about high levels of burning metals like magnesium and things like that. We had a snowmobile in the back of a van that was on fire for one of our cases, and hit it with water, and all we saw was these big explosion of sparks from the magnesium that was burning in the engine of the snowmobile. We hit it with water, and we had that big explosion anyways that went with it. So, and then Class K is what you'll find in most kitchens, whether it's hanging on the wall like a regular portable fire extinguisher, or that's the system that they usually have in the hoods too. So above the frying the grease vats, or an area where there might be grease, that's what usually there's nozzles that come down off of that, and they can be operated either by heat, where if the flames get too high or to a certain heat, they melt the frangible link, and it allows the flow of the Class K material. Or there's a handle, you pull a red handle inside the kitchen, and that launches that out. Sometimes restaurants are hesitant to pull it right away because it makes a heck of a mess. And it takes, a couple of days minimum kitchen cleaning to open back up. So sometimes folks are a little more hesitant to set those extinguishers off because of that. So again, Class A fires involve ordinary combustibles, things like textiles, paper, plastics, rubber, wood, all the normal combustibles. Typically, the extinguishment material used in that is water or water-based agents, which means a Class A type foam, or dry chemicals. Usually something with bicarbonate in it, or something along those lines is one of those chemicals that are primarily used in the dry chemical fire extinguishers. And they're probably the most common style of fire extinguisher out there, is the dry chemicals. Class B fires are combustible liquids and gases, includes alcohol, gasoline, lubricating oils, and liquefied petroleum gas. The big one that you have to worry about is the alcohol. We've got an ethanol plant, and they have a pretty high percentage. They mix just enough gasoline in it to make it so it's not basically moonshine when they ship it. So it's got a high level of alcohol. Certain foams, Class B foams with high levels of alcohol, it can eat through that Class B foam. So it takes a special kind of Class B foam with high alcohol fuels to be able to put those fires out. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later. But so you have to be aware of that too. Typically, Class B fires, you use your carbon dioxide extinguisher, dry chemicals, or a Class B foam. And again, we have that alcohol concern, so you have to use a special foam that is a little bit more resistant to the alcohol to be able to put those fires out. Class C fire, pretty straightforward, energized equipment. Once the energy is taken away from it, then you can put out the fire with any extinguisher. But if you don't have a way to shut off the power, then you want to make sure and just you make sure your extinguisher is rated for Class C fires as well. Class D fires are combustible metals and alloys. You got lithium, magnesium, potassium, and sodium. Some of these are the fun ones that you're seeing on the airplanes that start to smoke when they're shipped. So they have to be in a special container, or they're not allowed to be shipped by air. In some cases, depends on, I don't remember what all the rules are now, but the different lithium style batteries that are out there. So again, use of water or water-based agents on Class D fires, it's going to make that Class D react violently, and it's going to emit bits of molten metal and possibly injure firefighters close by. And if you do a search on YouTube, you can see tons of videos, and I've got one that I'll show you toward the end here. But they apply water to a Class D or a burning metal fire, and it's amazing. It just intensifies the fire, usually causes an explosion because the water gets in underneath the metal, creates a steam pocket, and that steam pocket causes an explosion, putting flaming metals everywhere. It ruins a set of bunker gear pretty fast if that's what happens. If you're close enough to get that molten metal on you, it'll ruin the bunker gear pretty fast. So it'll protect you if it's a small amount, but it's still a risk that we should necessarily not be taking. So you want to make sure it's a dry powder and not a dry chemical extinguisher. So it has to be the right dry powder and not the dry chemical, because certain chemicals are also going to react and create those pockets or create the violent reaction of those metals that you'll see. So in your book, it kind of outlines which dry chemicals versus dry powders they're talking about. Again, reacts violently with those burning metals. Class K is your combustible cooking oils that we talked about. Usually there's vegetable or animal fats involved. They burn at extreme temperatures, so they have to get pretty hot to be able to actually have flames or burn. Most of the restaurants, I don't know what they run at, 350 maybe. Between 250 and 350, I suppose, for temperature on their oils. So it takes a lot to get flames to actually be produced. So when they are produced and they get going, they're going to put out a putrid smoke, and they're going to be difficult to extinguish. That's why that Class K, it's more of a foaming product, and it is able to spread out and not break down in those vegetable, the vegetable or the animal fats as it's burning. So. Again, those are controlled by wet chemical systems or portable extinguishers. Just depends on how much they have for fryers, how much they have for cooking space, as to whether they just have to have one hanging on the wall, or as you see up in the picture there on the hood, you see, there's 1, 2, 4, 5, or 6 different areas down there that have the nozzles that come down, and that's part of that extension, or part of that extinguishment system. So. So we'll describe the different types of portable fire extinguishers. Fire extinguishers are organized by the type of extinguishing agent and the method used to expel their contents. So the different extinguishing agents, depending on what's in there, will either smother the fire and exclude oxygen from being able to get to the fuel. It will cool it or reduce its temperature. Most of your Class A, that's what you see, it's just water. Works the same way as your fire hose. It cools the fire down to a point. Because as you remember from fire behavior from Russ, you have to have, I think they call it tetrahedron now, is that what it's, so you have to have all those elements to make fire burn. And if you cool it and take away that temperature, that interrupts that fire tetrahedron anyways. Chain breaking interrupts the chemical chain reaction. And the big word, your $5 word of the week anyways, is saponification, which forms oxygen excluding foam. So it basically puts a layer of foam on there, and it doesn't allow oxygen to get to the fuel, and therefore it can't burn without that oxygen. The different ways, depending on the agent, but there's different ways to expel their contents. And we have basically all but the one kind, the pressure cartridge at the fire department. We have a manual pump, which physical pressures force the age down the nozzle. It's a squirt gun, if you will, except you don't pump it up. It's just every time you pump, the water comes out. We have those in backpacks on our grass trucks, and they come in pretty handy. You can fill them. I think they're 2.5 gallons usually, and then you just move the handle like a trombone, as they describe it in the book, and that expels the water out of that. Stored pressure, which is the most common type of extinguisher that we have, is compressed air or an inert gas, and it forces the agent out of the nozzle. And then there's the pressure cartridge style, which is usually on the side. You can see it. There's a big piece that comes off the side of the extinguisher, and when you open it up, there's a cartridge in there of a inert gas, and you have to activate that. Puts the gas in the extinguisher, and then it uses that to pressure put your extinguishment or push it out of the extinguisher. So, don't see a lot of those anymore, but there's still a few of them around. Usually, it'll have a big instruction guide on it. Says press here to extinguish fire, and you have to press it pretty hard. Breaks a valve, allows the gas to fill into the tank, and then you can use your extinguisher from there. So, there's the pump style. Common again on Class A or ground cover fires, usually backpack worn, and then you got a couple gallons of water to be able to put out small smothering fires. Stored pressure water extinguishers. A lot of people, depending on how many TV shows you watch, I guess they refer to this as the can. Okay, it's just a can of water under it with air pressure, and we use it a significant amount. Sometimes this is all we do. Instead of dragging an 1.5 inch hose line in, we may grab the middle extinguisher there, the silver one, and take that in to extinguish a fire. We had a fireplace that was improperly installed. They set the fire bricks directly on the subfloor, is what they did on the fireplace, and of course it heated up over time, and then eventually it started the subfloor on fire. Well, instead of dragging an 1.5 inch hose through the snow and into these people's house, we just took the Class A in, we were able to cool it down the bricks enough until we were able to load them in a bucket and haul them out, and then we were able to put the subfloor out with a couple gallons of water out of the can instead of dragging in an 1.5 inches. And you know, as soon as you open that 1.5 inches up, you got 10 or 15, 20, 25 gallons easily on the floor and can cause problems. So, and we don't want that if we can help it anyways. So, they talk about water mist stored pressure extinguishers on Class C fires. They call it deionized water, not supposed to be able to transmit the electricity back to you anyways, or stored pressure water with just normal water in it is that. Wet chemical stored pressure extinguishers on Class K, again, it's basically water with foam in it, already mixed into it. And then when you use the extinguisher, the nozzle has an air injector in it basically, that as the water flows out, it pulls the air into that nozzle, and it creates a little bit of that foam. It's not like the foam blanket that you see necessarily, but it allows it to sit across the top of that burning oil, and it spreads out over the top, and then there's your $5 word of the week again, and it creates that saponification and suffocates the fire out. Okay? So that's the Class K extinguisher. It's basically a wet foam. Then you have the AFFF or aqueous film forming foam extinguishers. Pretty common on Class B fires. I should have looked it up. I apologize, I didn't have time. I can't remember. I think the AFFF is not as effective on the alcohol. I believe that there's another type of foam that you need to get for more higher content alcohol fires. But I'll look it up and get it to you, that information passed on. So, but I believe the AFFF can be eaten through with high alcohol content fires, and so you want to use a different type of foam. It's a good starter if it's a small enough fire and you can keep applying it. It works great, but if it's a larger area, you have to be careful with that because it'll start to break down, and then you'll have your fuel load exposed again where it eats through that foam. So. And then they talk about clean Asian extinguishers. Used to be a lot of extinguishers out there that they sell with halon in them. What they found out is it's not good for the ozone, it's not good for the environment, and so they have adjusted the halon material that they use in there now. It's listed out in your book what the one is safe now. But basically you see these in a lot of your computer rooms and things like that. I know I've seen it at hospitals. In their main computer rooms, they have them inside the closets with it. It does warn you that if the system goes off, get out immediately because it will asphyxiate you. It displaces the oxygen, and that's how it works on putting out the fire. And that's kind of how the halon worked too, is it would displace the oxygen and allow the fire to be extinguished that way.
ARF foam.
ARF foam,
Alcohol resistant.
Yes.
Alcohol type.
Thank you. I knew that it was something simple, I just couldn't think of it.
Arf.
So ARF foam is recommended for alcohol fires, where the AFFF can be used, but it's going to eat through that foam if you have a large enough spill. So ARF is what you want to use with a high alcohol content fuel. The clean agent extinguisher, some of the advantages: it's a rapid evaporating liquid that leaves no residue. It cools and smothers Class A and B fires. It's non-conductive, so it's safe to use on energized electrical equipment. One big thing they caution about is not using a dry powder chemical extinguisher in computer rooms because it's so corrosive, it's going to completely damage any computer equipment in there. Now, sometimes you got to do what you got to do, but if you can try and avoid that so that you don't damage or cause more problems, then that's better as well. Carbon dioxide extinguishers discharge a gas, most effective on Class B and Class C fires. The problem is there's a limited reach to them. It's easily dispersed or taken away by the wind, and there is no freeze protection that's required on those. So we don't use it a lot. In fact, you can see it's probably brand new. It's only the only thing that's happened is it's been inspected. But it's not a big one that we use a lot. It does work for certain types of fires a little bit better, but mostly we use the dry chem or just the Class A, the water can, to put out a lot of our fires. So again, CO2 is stored under its own pressure and is discharged through a plastic or rubber horn. Ours is stored separate, so you'd have to actually put it on the end there. In the truck, it's just easier to store it that way. It doesn't take very long to put on the end of it anyways. What it does is it smothers the fire, really doesn't cool it, and then reignition is possible. So you want to make sure and keep it close. And a lot of times with CO, if you're putting out a fire, you're going to have to hit it a couple of times, 2 or 3 or 4 times, to completely get it extinguished, because it's a smothering agent and it doesn't have any of the other separating qualities of the other extinguishers. So. They talk about static discharge can build up on the discharge horn, and you can get a shock from that because of the rapid push of the gas through there can create static electricity, so just something else to be aware of anyways. There are some wheeled CO2 extinguishers, and they work the same manner as handhelds. There's a giant one for the heart hospital. I don't know if you noticed it walking out there. Just to the left of the garage doors there, as you're walking out, they have a huge CO. I believe it's CO. I've looked at it before, but I can't remember. But it's for their helicopter pad, and it's good size. This is like a standard tank here, and it's probably triple or quadruple that size around anyways, and it's on a wheeled cart just inside the door, and it's for their helicopter pad. That's their fire extinguishment for that. So, but I'll try and grab a picture of it sometime. I keep forgetting to do that when we go by it, but I see it and notice it every time because it's big and it's red and on wheels. So yeah, you have to look and see. So it's pretty neat. Dry chemical extinguishers use additives to keep extinguishing agents ready for use even after long storage periods. So usually the powder in there, the big thing that you have to do for them, and they'll talk about that in the maintenance section, but a lot of times it's a good idea, you know, a couple times a year. They say once a month is tip them upside down, give them a good shake. What you see most of the inspection guys doing is they flip them upside down and tap it on the bottom a couple times with a rubber mallet to get it all loosened up. So if there's any moisture in there, that kind of helps loosen that powder up inside there again and gets it so that you can use that extinguisher. So remember that most regular dry chem extinguishers are BC, and then there's multi-purpose extinguishers, which will do your ABC fires, or all 3 in one. And so we'll look at those on the labels when we get toward the end here anyways. So just be aware of what you're extinguishing, especially your Class D fires. Some certain other chemicals, if you're working a chemical fire with an ABC extinguisher for whatever reason, just be aware of what it may react to, what it doesn't work well with. There's not a lot with ABC, but there are some. If it's an unknown chemical or something we don't deal with every day, it wouldn't hurt to do a short test before we see and make sure it's not going to make the fire worse before we unload a whole extinguisher on it. Most dry chemical agents that are in there are considered non-toxic and safe for use. It's definitely going to reduce your visibility in the area. For those that were up at the structure fire in Spirit Lake, where the RV was on fire with a diesel tank burning in between, and we ended up hitting it on both sides with the dry chemical extinguisher. We weren't concerned about, the toxic effects of that, but it's not great for you to breathe in either.
Tastes like crap.
But yeah, it's not very fun, but it's definitely reduced visibility for a little while. It can create respiratory problems, especially if you have any history of respiratory problems. And it may not be compatible with any foam that you use, because of its acidity, it may actually break down your foam and cause more problems for you. If you have a foam blanket out on a fire and then you put dry chem on top of it, it may actually break down that foam, so you have to be worried about that too. So when you're using a dry chemical extinguisher on Class A fires, directly discharge it to cover the fire with a chemical. After the flames are knocked down, then apply more of the dry chemical to whatever area might be smoldering. The two designs we kind of talked about, the cartridge operated, so there's a pressure cartridge on the side, tank's not pressurized until you push the plunger, or the stored pressure, again, is a much more common style, similar to air pressurized water, and usually the pressure is about 200 psi is what most of those are stored at to keep them in the green. And so again, when you're inspecting them, and we'll talk about that a little later, then you should keep an eye on that pressure to make sure that it's in the green when you're taking a look. When you're doing truck checks, if you're on the engine or the ladder, should be looking at extinguishers, making sure that they're in the green. They talk about if you do use that pressurized style, don't put your head over the handle or over the top of it, because when they put the chemical in, then they screw or tighten the top of that back down where the handle goes, and if they don't get it tight enough and you hit that pressure, it can actually come popping off. So just be aware of that so you don't get struck with flying objects as they pressurize that, because that's a pretty hard hit. It pressurizes it to that 200 psi in a pretty big hurry with that cartridge, so you need to be careful with that. Again, there can be wheeled dry chemical, and like I said, I can't remember if it's a CO2 or a dry chemical extinguisher that they have up at the Heart Hospital. We'll have to look again and see what it is, but it's got a hose on it as well, so it may be a dry chemical extinguisher for them, that you have to unwind the hose all the way, stretch it out. Otherwise, any kinks in the line can cause that powder to clog up. And they say prepare for a significant nozzle reaction on those wheeled carts. So I don't know what pressure they are, but it's going to be a lot bigger hose. So if you all of a sudden open that valve and that's 200 psi coming out of the end, that can be a pretty significant nozzle reaction. So, and if you do have to pressurize it by opening a valve, make sure and give it a few seconds for the tank to fully pressurize before you open the valve to start putting the fire out. Again, point the top away so you don't get hit when you're pressurizing it. There's an example of a cartridge operated one. You can see the big extension off to the right side of that extinguisher. And so that would be where the cartridge is held that you would need to compress down to activate it. Certain Class Ds might have more of those because they don't work well with the pressurization gases that cake up. So they want to keep them as completely dry as they can, so that might be why they add that pressurized agents later, so that it doesn't cake up and it'll work properly. Again, no agent works on all metals, comes in several models. You can either use an extinguisher, or some bigger cities or industrial areas actually just have bags of material that you can put over the burning metal. So you go and you get a shovel and you bring it over and you dump it out onto the fire and shovel it up onto the fire to get it put out. And you'll have to find out, hopefully they have knowledge of if this starts on fire, this is what we need to do to put it out, and they have some of the extinguishment product there, especially if they handle a large amount of it. And these fires can be deadly in those industrial areas. They had a dumpster where they would dump their metal shavings at one industrial place, and it looked like a regular dumpster, garbage dumpster out the back. It was on fire. Fire department got there, and just as they started to apply extinguishment to it, the whole dumpster blew up. ended up killing one firefighter and seriously injuring another because they weren't aware that it was metal in the back of that when they hit it to try and extinguish it. And the whole dumpster blew up, and they were pretty heavy metal and ended up killing them. So. Dry powder creates a smothering blanket over the burning area. You need to apply it to a sufficient depth. So this is still your Class D fires. So you have the fire going, you're gonna put the powder over the top of it, and then apply it gently over the top. What it's gonna do, it's gonna create a crust. Whether it's a dry chemical or whatever it happens to be that you use for that particular metal, as it hits that hot molten metal, it's gonna react to it and it's gonna start creating a crust over the top that helps keep the oxygen level or bring the oxygen level down, and then it'll take a while for that to cool enough to a point where it extinguishes itself when you get that chemical over the top. Make sure and apply additional chemical gently so you don't break the crust, and then avoid scattering or spreading it out if you can help it anyways. So there's their graphic for you.
It's pretty cool.
This one's full of it. So. Okay. Again, water applied to combustible metal fire results in a violent reaction. Again, I'll show you a video as we get to the end here. If it's on a combustible surface, something that we don't always think about, if it's on a wood pallet or it's on burning grass or something like that, create a layer of powder nearby 1 to 2 inches deep, and then spread it nearby and add more as you need to, and then try and leave it undisturbed until it's completely cool. So you're still going to have to cover it, but depending on the situation, you may have to use a couple different kinds of extinguishers if the fire spreads from the metal that's burning anyways. So, ratings. Something I didn't know until I took Firefighter 1 either, that they're actually rated extinguishers. So, in Class A, your ordinary combustibles are rated based on the gallons of water that they hold. Okay? So if it's a Class 1A fire extinguisher, it carries 1 1/4 gallons of water. If it's 2A, it's 2.5 gallons. 3A, of course, it'd be 5 gallons. So on and so forth, based on what the rating system is there. 1B through 640B, it's based on the approximate square footage or square meters of area of flammable liquid a non-expert can extinguish. So it's hard to kind of look, and you're not going to necessarily go and look at an extinguisher before, oh yeah, this is 640 square feet, I think this one will cover it. No, it's going to go off of your 5 pound, 10 pound, 20 pound extinguishers, basically is what people look at. So for example, this one that I have here, 20 pound fire extinguisher. So if you look at it, it says classification, it's a 20A, 120BC is what it's designed to cover. Okay, so it'll cover 120 square feet with a BC on there. And then it does have the pictographs. This is an ABC or a multi-purpose extinguisher on there. So we'll talk about the pictographs. There'll be a slide here in a little bit on that. But so it's good for type A, ordinary combustibles, type B, flammable gases, and it's okay to use on charged electrical areas. Okay. This one's covered up, unfortunately, with the band on there. That's your CO2 extinguisher. They also do exclusionaries on the ones on the fires that you shouldn't use it on. So this is a water extinguisher here. All it contains is water and is pressurized by air. So it's strictly Class A, and then they put a red line through B and C, so you know that you shouldn't use it on flammable liquids, and you shouldn't use it on charged electrical, because obviously it's a risk of being shocked if you're using that. So, okay, so that's all listed out on there, and then it'll tell you some of them are rated for how much or what classification, and this is a 2A. Okay, so based on the 2A on there, it's got 2.5 gallons of water, and then it's just pressurized with the air. Obviously, there's no rating really for Class C. It either is conductive or it's not conductive when the materials are sent. So Class D, there's no numerical ratings either. It's just tested for reactions, toxicity, and the metal burnout time. So that's all going to be based on what metal it's designed for. And then K, again, doesn't have a numerical rating. It's just tested for effectiveness against a 2.25 square foot of light cooking oil in a deep fat fryer. So there's formulas out there based on how much cooking area that they're working with as to how big the extinguisher needs to be in these kitchens. It also is based on hood size and then how much area that hood has to cover. So. Okay, so just another way to put it, Class A is based on the amount of agent, duration, and range of discharge. Class B is based on approximate area that non-expert can extinguish with a full extinguisher. Again, no rating for C, D, or K. Except for the K is based on the capability of to saponify the cooking oils. So, just a fun word to say.
Rolls off the tongue.
Yeah. So, fire extinguishers are rated for multiple classes of fires are identified by a combination of letters. So, again, if it's a class A, B, C fire extinguisher, there will be a rating for A and a rating for B. And then it either is approved for C or it's not. If it's just an A, B, there'll be ratings for A and B. If it's B, C, the only rating that you'll get is for the B. Okay, based on the square footage that it can put out or its intended purpose. So. And one rating doesn't reflect on the other necessarily. It just depends on the material that's in there and the distance it can reach and how much fire they can put out anyways. There's the symbols. The ones on the left, I don't see a lot anymore on fire extinguishers. Occasionally on older extinguishers you'll run across them. But they have the triangle green for A, the square red for B, circle C, circle blue for C, the yellow star for D, and then the black K. I do see the black K quite a bit on the kitchen ones, but the ABC I see more the pictographs that are put on there, especially the ones that are sold for general lay public use anyways. So. Combustible metal one's kind of confusing, but
Yeah. Sprocket on fire.
yeah. I have seen, I don't know if they're all that way, but most of the Class D extinguishers that I've come across are yellow in color. So they're specific, but that they don't necessarily have to be yellow, I don't think. I think they can be whatever color, but most of the ones I've come across are yellow in color. Okay. So when selecting or what you should take into accountability when you're selecting or using the fire extinguisher, first of all, is it small enough? Is it in the incipient stages of the fire yet so that we can get it at it with the fire extinguisher? Or that's what we should teach the lay public. If it's in the early stages, that's when to use a fire extinguisher. If it's gone beyond that, focus on your escape, focus on going to your meeting place and things like that. But if you can use it in the early stages, then and you think it'll be effective in extinguishing the fire, then go ahead and do that. We've had some good preventative use of fire extinguishers. We had a hotel room where the curtains started on fire, and the guy didn't open the door, but he stuck the extinguisher underneath the door, an ABC powder extinguisher, and just let her fly. Stuck it underneath the door, and he actually got the fire extinguished doing that. Before we got there, all we had was a little bit of smoldering pile of curtains to put out, and so kept it from being a full room and contents fire anyways. But I'm glad he didn't open the door, because I think it would have been a lot more than what he had bargained for if he did, but he did a good job by not doing that. So, other factors when selecting a fire extinguisher: what fuels do you have or are you dealing with for a fire? Rating, again, you're not going to look at that other than the size of the extinguisher. Is this going to be big enough to handle what I got? An example, the other day, Spirit Lake had a car fire, I think Sunday it was maybe, and they had one of those pop can, or I don't know, he called it a shaving cream type size can extinguisher, and they had that to put the fire out. But the firefighter I was talking to basically said, "How did you put the car fire out with that little extinguisher?" And he goes, "I didn't. I couldn't get the thing figured out how to work it, so the neighbor brought a 5-pounder over and put it out for me," because the guy was a previous firefighter. So, but you know, that would be a case of that probably wouldn't have done much anyways, and the powder extinguisher, the 5-pounder, come over and did the job. So, So just something to think about with size for that. Again, you're not necessarily going to look at the rating, you're going to look at the size of the extinguisher and kind of have an idea as you use extinguishers what works and what doesn't. So, what are the hazards associated? Fire size and intensity is a big part of that. The atmospheric conditions, we have to take that into consideration. How fast does the wind blow and what direction is it, and is it safe for me to approach and use a fire extinguisher? If I do use a fire extinguisher, is my extinguishment powder or product just going to blow everywhere and not do anything to the fire anyways? And I'm not saying nobody shouldn't try, but a lot of times that's the case. People are too far away or it's too big of a fire when they're trying to extinguish the fire and it just doesn't work. Are you trained to use the extinguisher? Are you able to handle it with ease? Are there any life hazards? And then any operational concerns with using that extinguisher? Is it going to cause more problems for you? One big thing I teach people is to take their fire extinguishers out of their kitchen, because that's a common area that people put fire extinguishers in, and tell them to replace it with baking powder, baking soda, whatever, a box of that by there, because people have a tendency with frying pan fires to want to try and hit it with that fire extinguisher, and then they start the whole kitchen on fire. So just something to think about there anyways, when you're teaching folks that. Try and use a clean agent or CO2 if you have computer equipment in the area. Again, dry chemicals can be damaging to those areas. Pretty much operating procedures for most fire extinguishers are similar, but you want to make sure that you're familiar with the ones that you have to use. For example, our CO, you know, you have to put the hose on the end for ours off of the fire truck. There may be some differences in each one. So industry, a lot of times they have a training a year as part of their safety program, so they're aware of how to use theirs. Same here, we'll practice with some practice extinguishers, but they have the same operation as what we have on our fire trucks. So, as a firefighter, you should be wearing personal protective equipment at any fire, and so make sure you wear full structural or wildland firefighting protective equipment, and you should be doing that anyways, but make sure you have PPE on when you're operating a portable fire extinguisher, and maybe even SCBAs depending on what you're putting out. We talk about dumpster fires. No, it's just a dumpster fire, but imagine what people put into their dumpsters, and it ends up being a problem for you, or can be a problem for you. So after you decide what extinguisher is going to be most appropriate for a fire, do a real quick inspection of it. Make sure the external shell and everything's in good shape for you to use. Make sure and take a quick peek at the nozzle. Is it clear? Does it have any debris in it? You know, this time of year, did I set it down in a snowbank and fill the end of the nozzle with snow when I set it down on the ground? Or if I set it down in dirt, is it clogged up with that? You should be able to tell just by lifting the extinguisher if it has the material in it that it needs to do the extinguishment. And then look at the pressure gauge real quick. Nothing worse feeling, you get the pin pulled out of there, you get up to the fire and you squeeze the handle and it gives you one puff and it's done. Okay, so, and it looks kind of silly on us too, so make sure your extinguisher's full when you go and approach. Sometimes stuff happens. If they're not taken care of properly, it can be caked up or something and not work properly, but you should be checking that to make sure when you approach the fire. So, try and approach any fire with an extinguisher with the wind at your back. Pick it up and carry it by the handle. So this is the handle here on all of these, the bottom piece, and then you squeeze the top and that opens the valve that allows the flow to come out of the extinguisher anyways. And you can pick it up and carry it. If it's a bigger extinguisher, then you not only can pick it up by the handle, but grab it by the bottom so that you're carrying it cross body as you're carrying it out there. You carry it like this, it can definitely weigh on you pretty quick, and this way you can be doing a couple of your inspections while you're walking up to the fire. I can see that it's in the green, I can see it's in good shape, I can grab the nozzle. When I get there, yep, it's clear, and now I can pull my pin and it's ready to use. Okay? So that's what they recommend in anyways, is carrying it by the handle and cross body, especially with the heavier ones. Because I've seen some of those handles bend on some of those extinguishers before, so you want to be aware of that too. When you're using an extinguisher, make sure the agent's going to reach the fire. One thing they recommend is doing a quick test shot with it, just a quick squirt to see what kind of distance and pressure you're going to have with it. Apply from an appropriate distance, and then after the fire reduces, if it's not extinguished fully, withdraw and reassess. If it's a solid fuel, use the appropriate tool to overhaul. If it's a liquid fuel, you may need to add foam into your fight there as your fire goes. So, things to think about: their first aid appliances. The fire needs to be in the incipient stage. It's not a replacement. They talk in the story, I think, at the beginning of your chapter about going up on a fire and being outgunned because all they brought in was an extinguisher and not a hose line with them. And so the fire got more out of control or may not be quite enough to get the fire put out. So think about that as you go. Work in unison. If there's more than one of you using an extinguisher, big enough fire, you think you can get it with a couple extinguishers like we did with the RV fire and the diesel fuel. Make sure that you can work together and hopefully use hand signals or verbal signals so that you can work together to get that extinguished. And then one thing they recommend is laying your empty extinguishers on their side. So leave the full ones standing upright, lay the empty ones on their side so people know that they're spent and won't grab them thinking that they have them. Hopefully if they grab them, they'll feel the weight difference and know that it's empty, because there's a significant weight difference between a full extinguisher and an empty extinguisher. All right, on to number 5. Identify procedures used for inspection, care, and maintenance of portable fire extinguishers. So for fire departments, it's based on with NFPA 10 is what regulates how we should inspect our fire extinguishers. Or if you have a local standard operating policy for inspecting them. We don't have an SOP here at the department, but we try and get them inspected on a regular basis so that they're ready to go. They're used, I wouldn't say fairly frequently, but they're used a lot more than some of our other tools on the truck, I guess. So especially our Class A with the water and the air pressure, it's easy to refill and easy to use. So. If they're privately owned, they're regulated by locally adopted codes. Most places will do their annual inspections or have maintenance staff trained that will also do monthly inspections to make sure that their extinguishers are in good shape. Some of the things NFPA 10 requires is that they have an annual inspection. And if there's a local SOP, that you should establish a policy is what they say here. Factors that help determine the value of that is the extinguisher serviceable? After so many years, you can hydro test them just like our SCBA tanks, but after so many years you need to replace them because they're no longer in their usable life. They should be simple to use, and then are they accessible? And our extinguishers for the fire department are accessible. They're on a pull-out tray on the ladder truck, and they're on a small door on the cab of the engine is where they are, so they're easy to get at and to pull out and use if we need them. So when you're doing your extinguisher inspection, you want to make sure that it's in the proper location and that it's accessible for use. Make sure that the nozzle and horn's not obstructed. Make sure the hose is free of cracks, dirt, and grease, and the shell is not damaged on the outside. Just like with SCBA tanks, you have to be careful not to have a damaged tank and try and fill it, because obviously that's going to create risk of failure of that vessel anyways. Make sure the instructions are legible. We have one that's not. We'll have to move that holder down, but it should be at a better location for that anyways. Make sure the seal in the pin's not tampered with. Make sure it's filled and fully pressurized. They say you can weigh them. Certain extinguishers should have a certain weight to them, and I know Jim Carpenter with his business that he does, caps fire extinguishers, that's how they determine the amount of powder in the extinguisher is they weigh the unit, then they weigh the powder that's in there, and that's how they adjust it. They say if it's got a 10% deficiency in its weight, it should be removed from service, and then there should be an inspection tag with a recent inspection on there. So those are all things that you should be looking for with your extinguisher inspections. If there's anything that is found to be deficient with your inspection, obviously remove it from service, replace it with an operational, and then report its need for service. And then again, we actually call an extinguisher service to put them back in service for us That's just not something we do as a department or haven't gotten into anyways, so. Some of the things to follow for general guidelines for caring for extinguishers, obviously never drop it or throw it. Drops happen from time to time, but just make sure and inspect it after, if you do drop it. Carry according to size and weight. Again, your heavier ones kind of cross carry with a handle and then also under the side there. Remove the pin only when you're ready to use it, and then make sure that it's stored securely. On our truck we have upright stands with holders that hold them securely in the cabinet or in place, plus they're behind a closed cabinet door. Again, lay on side when it's empty. If there's a wall mounted extinguisher in the fire station or in a business, make sure that there's no items stacked in front of it. And again, they say that you should shake the dry chemical ones monthly, or more frequently to keep that powder loose in there anyways. Should be cleaned on the outside, warm water and soap to remove dirt and grease. Don't try and do any solvents that are going to damage any of the plastic parts. Use steel wool or sandpaper to remove any corrosion on them, and then only trained personnel should repair or refill your extinguishers. Annual maintenance should occur. Should have a thorough inspection and disassembly. As we talked about, the pressurized units have to be hydrostatically tested, just like our SCBA tanks. And then dry chemical units should be emptied and refilled every 6 years. Just because of the chemical, that's about how long they say it's stable for anyways. So obviously shouldn't try and repair or replace it or repair it ourselves, just try and get it replaced if it is damaged on the outside anyways. So your portable fire extinguishers can control or extinguish a small incipient or early growth stage fire if it's in the hands of a trained person or somebody that's familiar with the characteristics and be able to select and use the right extinguisher. Not only should you be familiar with characteristics of fire extinguishers, but you should be able to select and use them properly. And then as firefighters, if it's something that you're interested in teaching to the lay public, it's something we should have information on and be able to provide to. And then inspecting, caring for, and maintaining extinguishers assigned to your apparatus and facility are important skills to have as well. So it never hurts to have an extra set of eyes looking at our extinguishers and, hey, we haven't had this looked at for a while, or it's been a year, maybe we should have it looked at again. It never hurts to have that in hand as well. So, and then we're gonna operate some extinguishers tonight, and then we'll get it out again on another skills day, but that's all I have for the lecture part of it anyways tonight. So are there any questions? Okay.
The K fire extinguishers, do they always have a kind of a fan pattern to them, or for grease fires, is that kind of the normal? It seems like a straight stream might make more problems for you.
Yeah, I don't have a great answer for that, I guess. The last one I used, because I didn't realize it was a K extinguisher, was at our electrical fire over at the cafe, and it came out more as a straight stream.
It did.
So, it wasn't a fast, like high pressure one. It kind of sputtered out, but I think it would work good for grease fires if it did that anyways, because then it spreads out over the top of the grease. So.
Like the water-based ones, are you guys able to fill those yourselves?
Yep.
Or do you have to have that?
Nope, that's the simple, you're supposed to put the 2.5 gallons in or the 5 liters, and we actually have the training system. So with that training system, we've actually got a liter cup with it, so we can put the exact amount that we're supposed to put in there. And then it's got the pressure, you just hook up the air hose to it and get it right in the pressure area where you need it to go. So that's kind of nice, yeah, we don't have to worry about that one. The dry chems we send off to a fire extinguisher service to be able to fill them. Same with the CO2, but we haven't used that one for a long time, so I'm not sure if our fire extinguisher services do those too, or if they have to send them out as well, so. So yeah, these are the bigger ones we carry, and then, a lot of times for home, you see the 5-pounders or the 10-pounders, a little bit smaller ones anyways. So. The other thing I have is, this is something that we have here at the station for training, the lay public. I've gone out and done a few classes with it, so we have several of these available anyways, but it gives a real basic review, and provides them with the information that they need, so. So when you when you use an extinguisher, and they didn't have it in your slides, but when you use an extinguisher, the pass is the big thing that most of your industry teaches, and it's something that's easy to remember for the lay public too. The first step is to pull the pin. So this one has just got it doesn't have the tag on it to keep it in place like this one is, but you just pull the pin. You wanna aim it at whatever you're gonna be putting out, squeeze the handle, and then sweep back and forth. I'm not gonna, here, catch it.
I was thinking too, like, oh god.
Be a nice cube when I walk out the
See if you squeeze
2.5 gallons of water, get kinda cold tonight, I think. So, well, most of them have a tag on it. This one's not, I thought it looked heavier duty than what it is, but it's not too bad anyway, so. And you'll get to do that when we practice tonight, so. I am gonna call Andy before we start though, cause I set off the fire alarms earlier with the heat detector, but we'll, practice a few rounds anyways, and then we'll get it picked up and get you out of here, so.